Hi, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from. My name is Angela Labrosi. I'm the Channel Partner Director at Within 3, and welcome to Partner Talks. Appreciate you joining us. Would like to just take a minute to run through what our agenda is going to look like. We're going to start with a couple of introductions, and then we will go into our presentation from our guest speakers. And then we'll open it up for Q&A and discussion. Would love to hear your experiences. Hope it's maybe a brainstorming session if you have any questions related to what you heard. And then in the last few minutes, we'll wrap up and would also love to hear suggestions for next time for our next partner talk. So as we are discussing today, please feel free to use the chat if you do have ideas for next time. But also, you know, as Mandy mentioned, would love to hear where you're joining us from, what your company is, and then your experiences in looking at virtual congresses. So Jen and Ben are our guest speakers joining us from Within 3. So I would love to have both of you introduce yourselves.
Yeah, I'll go first, Jen, if that's all right. So yeah, Ben Walschlager here. I'm a client relationship lead based on the West Coast. Prior to this, I ran a partner program, and prior to that, I was at agency life. So I have a fondness for agencies and partners.
Great. Thanks, Ben. And I'm Jen Teodoro. I am also a client relations lead here at Within 3. I've been with the company for about 3 years now. And prior to that, I also was in agency for about 14 years.
Great. Thank you both. So maybe many of you know the topic for this month's Partner Talks was looking at unique cases in asynchronous virtual meetings. So we had heard feedback actually from our last Partner Talks, and I'm hearing this a lot more as I'm speaking with some of our channel partners that are really looking for unique ways or different ways as they're speaking with their clients that are looking to host virtual events and meetings. So wanted to just put up, you know, here on the screen, a look at some of, you know, the external use cases that we've seen it Within 3. Perhaps as you're looking over these, just wanted to have you brainstorm a little bit, maybe reflect on any past experiences you've had. Or again, if you wanted to chat with us today about ideas you have, or maybe some challenges that your clients are talking to you about, and perhaps a virtual overtime meeting would be advantageous to them as they're planning for this year. Also, there's usage in internal experiences as well. We've seen a number of our channel partners also supporting on this end, especially when it comes to training, perhaps document planning and development. So just wanted to, you know, as Ben and Jen are talking through some of the unique cases that they've experienced recently, definitely encourage you to think creatively about that. And then as we were talking about virtual congresses, they're going to highlight some really unique cases related to that. And so my hope is also, I think that's really a hot topic this year. So definitely encourage any discussion. So again, feel free to use the chat and then we'll open it up for discussion. So Ben, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
So the first unique use case here is the idea of a asynchronous conference or event. So what I'm referring to here is, you know, your typical, let's say, yearly events where a bunch of individuals all fly to the same place, right? It's usually a mix of presentations, socializing, discussions. So you know the type of event I'm talking about. You know, oftentimes they tend to be a a single day event. Sometimes they're the 2 to 3 day event where people are really immersed. So we're thinking about using our software to reimagine how those events can look. So instead of having everyone fly and get together and spend all that money and all that time, instead you could have pre-recorded presentations in our software. And then you could have discussions or debriefs or follow-up questions based on what people are seeing. So you can get the same amount out of it, but nobody has to do any of the travel. We've done this a bunch internally. I've done this twice recently. Once was one of our clients wanted to, they usually bring all of their partners together and bounce their new strategy off them. And they usually do that live. So instead, what they did was they had a bunch of presenters talk about the new strategies, and then they had the partners react to what they thought about the strategies, how it would affect them, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one use we've seen there. And then the other one was one of our clients usually had a group of experts externally all come together to discuss different topics. And instead of doing it live, this year they used our software. A lot of these people didn't have the time to travel, and right now they obviously can't travel. So instead they did in our software, and both were very big successes. Next slide, please. So there are some considerations if you are thinking about running a asynchronous conference or event. The first one would be consider having some sort of live component to kick off the event and introduce the reimagined format. Obviously, this will be very different for everyone, and it's still good if you can to get some FaceTime to have everyone in one place at one time, so to speak, so that you're rolling it out with some fanfare and people can get comfortable with the software and how they're going to be using it over the coming weeks. The second consideration here is avoid trying to replace a traditional schedule on a one-to-one basis. So if you are setting up a typical 3-day event, you're not going to want to think of it as 3 days on our software, because people aren't going to be sitting there for 8 hours a day focused on the topic. Instead, I would encourage you to sort of reset what this event is, think about what the goals are, and then figure out how much time you'll need for each portion in order to hit those goals. So likely a 2 to 3 day event, that's going to be probably a 2-week discussion to allow people time to come in on their own, when they have free time. The third point here is consider asking people questions or getting their feedback prior to the actual start of the event. So this is useful in helping understand where people are at, help getting them comfortable with the platform. When we've done this recently, if it's opened up ahead of time, people can help shape the event better, and they can refine the presentations based on what people know or what they want to hear more about. The next point is, depending on the size of the group, you may want to consider breaking people into smaller discussion groups by role or geography or just random. Obviously, if you have let's say a 70-person event, 70 people is a lot to have a conversation. So it would make a lot more sense to break that out into smaller chunks so people can actually talk to one another and have a more flowing conversation. And then the last thought here is ensure participants are motivated. So if you are going to an event and you're sitting there having to focus all day, you're going to focus. It's all that's in front of you. But as people are doing this from home on their own time, they probably have 20 different things they could be doing. So you really want to make sure that, again, early on, there's that live part, so you can generate some excitement, explain the importance, motivate people in whatever way you can, because it's going to be a little bit harder to get their attention if they're doing this from the seat of their home versus a seat in some sort of conference hall. So that is the asynchronous conference. I can pass it over to Jen now to talk about the next one.
Great, thank you so much, Ben. So as Angela had mentioned before, the Within3 platform can support many different use cases. And I recently implemented a use case where my client executed one of these asynchronous sessions to discuss medical content included at booth conferences. Medical booths, they include disease state content in support to specific treatment options. And the purpose of this session was to obtain feedback from experts who also attend conferences and potentially find the content booth resources useful for further discussions. So The goals that you see listed here were, of course, to seek feedback on disease state medical content, pursue advice on educational gaps that can be addressed in the context of a medical booth, and then to understand the top resources that HCPs are recommending. To give you a little bit of background about the session, it took place over 10 days with 11 HCPs contributing to the discussion. There were 5 internal client moderators who also led the discussion and were probing and prompting the discussion and the engagement. So this format was really interesting. It was a little bit outside of the norm. They asked a few icebreaker questions for that first day. And those icebreaker questions provided this twofold outcome. It helped the advisors get to know each other, which, can be, a little bit difficult when we are virtual. And it also helps set the foundation for the comfort level on the platform. A little bit about what Ben touched upon. We want to make sure that everybody that's in the platform is comfortable with the technology. So these icebreaker questions really helped help them kind of set the comfort level. We encouraged them to also use the tagging and all the reply features, so they were really well versed once the following days approached and they started their discussions. And these discussions, they were sparked by open-ended questions, multiple choice questions, and these questions were anchored by resources that the client provided in regard to the conference booth materials. And they were presented as infographics, videos, they reviewed lectures, and as well as links to external websites. Next slide, please. So again, this was a really successful session. I really enjoyed putting this together because again, it was the first time I had ever had a conference booth material review session. It took place in December. And it allowed our client to make very critical decisions and updates to their booth materials for presentation in March 2021. So because every single advisor had the chance to have this equal voice, they were really able to hold rich, deep discussions and gather insights faster than the conventional outlets. The client did utilize that moderator dashboard. They were able to identify key advisors for future sessions, monitor their participation levels, and they were able to access those transcripts throughout the 10-day duration. They established foundational relationships, which was really important because it was a new group. And they also let us know that they have plans to invite most of them back for further discussions. What was really great about this session is that not only did it provide an impactful outcome for their business, but it expanded their vision on how the platform could be incorporated into other areas within their teams. Of course, we have the standard advisory board and the steering committees, manuscript development, but they were looking towards gathering insights internally with their teams, with MSLs for strategy sessions, sharing best practices, internal trainings. So, as you can see here, the options are limitless. And it was really nice to see the team brainstorming the ways that they could utilize the platform and the solutions, that we were able to provide to them. With that, I will pass it back over to Angela for QA and further discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you both for that. So I thought, that's really interesting to see how clients are really starting to strategize around congresses. And certainly we don't really like to think of it as replacing a congress or replacing a live event necessarily, but perhaps enhancing it or working in conjunction, especially with a group of advisors. And I think that's really interesting, Jen, that they were really focused on, new advisors, identifying some new KOLs. So I would love to open it up to the floor if anybody first has any initial questions for Jen or Ben on either of those case studies. Feel free to, again, you're welcome to put on your video or unmute yourselves, or you can put questions in the chat. I had a couple questions myself, but we'll just give a minute. If anybody does. If not, not a problem. Well, what I did want to ask about was any feedback that you received from any of the advisors that participated. It's one question that I get a lot from our agency partners is the experience that the actual KOLs have within the session. So I was wondering if either of you could comment on that.
Ben, did you want to go first? I'm sorry.
Go for it. It's all you.
So actually for this particular session, they really enjoyed the format.
Okay.
We did receive some surveys back that they liked the fact that they had the time to take a look at the resources that were presented. So because there were infographics and, lectures to be reviewed, it was a little bit, the content was dense. So
Okay.
as opposed to connecting with these folks maybe in a live meeting where, it would be, they would have to kind of, do it at the pace of the meeting. This really allowed them to take a deep dive into the resources that they wanted to focus on. And it also allowed them, the time to really craft their responses. So this particular group, and again, because the content was so dense, it really was beneficial to do it over time because it gave them a chance to take breaks. They didn't have to review all at once. And because we also were able to release the questions in a staggered format, they were able to focus on certain subtopics every day. So new content was rolled out every day.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I can. So my statement is more agnostic to type of session, but it applies to every session, which is that advisors always prefer convenience. They always prefer, if you think about an event or conference, 99% of people prefer being at home with their family or doing their own life things instead of, traveling. So yes, they enjoy it and they enjoy the flexibility. There's always a percentage of people who will give feedback and say, I miss the rapport building. I miss the face-to-face. I don't think that's ever going to change. So I think if building rapport is a key part of your event or session, figure out how to add on to your session, figure out how to have some rapport building, whether it's fun questions, whether it's some live breakout rooms, anything like that. That would be my suggestion.
That was actually going to be one of my questions. I know we had something really interesting recently. I believe a client used essentially a fun room that it was just, that's all it was dedicated to, right? And they just asked, fun questions. And we've seen clients do this both internally and externally. So I think one of the internal uses was they wanted to get their employees accustomed to the platform, have buy-in from other divisions, but also just, before something went live, I think, what were they asking? Book suggestions, or they were just asking very fun information just to get people accustomed to it. So I thought that was a very clever use of the platform. The other thing I wanted to ask about, again, just a very popular question that we get, and we had talked about this quite a bit on our last partner talks, but for anybody that didn't watch that, related to hybrid model, because that really does, I think, play into these unique cases and utilizing our platform that can either come before or after, a live video webcast, however that they're doing it, if they're doing it in conjunction with the Congress. And that's what I'm thinking of, as these meetings occur, we're coming up on spring timeframe. Are you starting to see people are planning where they want to run something maybe alongside a Congress? Are they going to do some follow-up after? Can either of you comment on anything you're seeing there?
I actually ran a session that utilized the platform with their advisors, and they collected, initial insights prior to the Congress. These were actually external advisors, and they collected their insights. These were their key opinion leaders. And then they were able to, connect with them throughout the Congress, which was great. And then they bookended the live Congress basically with asynchronous sessions. So they opened it up and for, initial insights with their key opinion leaders. The key opinion leaders then attended the Congress. And then at the end, they continued those discussions that were highlighted during the live Congress with those key opinion leaders. And they were able to kind of provide some closure with this certain group. So the hybrid model seems to work really, really well, not only with congresses, but as Ben and yourself, Angela, have mentioned, just with meetings in general, because that live component, the ability to still connect on that personal level, is so important.
Sure. Okay.
I don't have anything to add to that, Jen. Jen nailed it.
No, but that's good. And that's good context when we're thinking about that. Other thing, and please, if anybody does have, any questions or wants to bounce any ideas off, I would love to take advantage of the fact that we do have some of our agency partners on the line. What advice would either of you give to our partners as they're speaking with clients? And let's say they've traditionally only run virtual advisory boards with us, but they really want to start thinking outside the box. Do you have any advice for them on how to bridge those conversations? Maybe as they're looking at their own internal services that their agency offers, and as they're working with the client, just strategically where they can make those connections between, utilizing a virtual asynchronous meeting and to support the initiatives that they're working on with the client.
Yeah, I can say what my exact strategy is. So the two slides you showed, slides 2 and 3, with all the different use cases, I put that in front of clients all the time and just say, these are things we've done, all of these. Which of these do you do? Because this always sparks a thought. Someone looks at one of these words and thinks, oh, we have to do this, or, oh, we haven't thought how we're going to do that. And this is a jumping off point for a lot of those conversations. So I'd say, if I were you, I'd take this and I'd put it in front of their face and, chop it up. If you don't support all of these, just pull out the ones you do support. But I think just showing them the sort of the blank space and what's all possible, I think that's the easiest way to let them tell you what they do.
Perhaps also, seeing what their vision is, moving forward as well, not just for the present. And then, brainstorming with them, how we can all connect everything together into, one larger umbrella, and then perhaps, separating it out, kind of moving backwards, like their final outcome, how they see success for, the end of their year, maybe, and then maybe working backwards towards how to get there.
Got it. Just going to leave this up a second. Anybody on the line, and I'd even encourage anybody, I know we have a couple members from our team that are also on the line. If any other case studies come to mind that you've worked on that you thought was, just a particularly interesting case using asynchronous. I know the patient materials, that's been another area of interest, and I'm seeing that a lot more too, that we're hearing from medical affairs, and being able to tap into patient resources and being able to work with them because it is so much easier on the platform. That is an area I've been getting a lot more questions about as well.
Yeah, hey Angela, it's Veronica. Can you hear me?
Oh yes.
Yeah, so, yeah, you just sparked some interest with me on patient, because while we're definitely seeing an uptick on patient sessions where they're the participant, A lot of times we also have patient-related sessions that the treatment team is the advisor. So like your nurses, your PAs, right? They spend a lot of times with patients and they're really, really good communicators. So they respond really well to this platform. And so some of the topics or types of sessions that I've seen are kind of patient journeys, right? Where they're pressure testing images to the nurses and trying to assess, is this the patient journey by the time they get to the appropriate healthcare provider for whatever their disease state is. Because ultimately what that's going to do is help your patient get treatment faster. And that could be, you know, the difference between a positive outcome and a negative outcome. So very often I see storyboards come across in those types of sessions. So we put up images and ask the nurses, the PAs, or even the entire treatment team, does this resonate with you? Is this how they get to you? And then they can sometimes have a part two where once they've refined that, they pressure test it with either other treatment teams just to kind of have a bit of a control, right? And then also go out to the patient and say, has this been your experience? Because ultimately they're at the heart of it.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure thing.
And I would even say, as a good segue, as clients are heading towards launch, we've even seen where they are using us from a positioning and messaging standpoint, you know, similar to the patients. Their pressure testing is, you know, the messaging resonating both from a physician angle as well as to patients, and really getting ready for any of those, that launch strategy for their materials. You know, we even see it here in the States for commercial use, if they want to show them video or different images.
Definitely, definitely. And so many a times what they'll do is they'll bring together a group of experts so that they can continuously pressure test things leading up to that launch, whether it's a full launch or they're up for a new indication in maybe a certain region. You know, depending on that region, the cultural differences, those messages might have to change. So what applies in the US may not apply in Canada, right? And so even up to the images of does this look like the type of patient that you typically see in Canada, right? So even those kind of things are really important. And so they can get really quick feedback from their advisors this way. That doesn't take a lot of time from their schedule.
Right, sure. No, I think the time and the convenience is just such a huge factor to be able to bring people together and receive those comments in just such an efficient way, for sure. That's terrific. Pull that down. Were there any, I'm going to just check the chat. Oh, were there any other questions from the group, just in terms of unique cases or just anything that you were thinking about for this year as you're planning with your clients? No problem. One other thing, before I do lose everybody, I know we've got one or two people that maybe have to hop off. I did want to poll for next time in terms of ideas for the next partner talks. We've gotten some great ideas last time, so I actually included those on this list. Also added a few others. If you do not see anything on this list, please feel free to put it in the chat. If you did have additional ideas, but we really want this to be an open forum for our partners to brainstorm, ask questions. In terms of some of the options I put down here, you know, this idea of a digital opinion leader is certainly a term that is being used, and looking at KOLs that are becoming very active digitally. Certainly MSL and sales training is something that we see a lot. So I wanted to include that if that's of interest. And then Congress trends, because we'd like to have different guest speakers, what we're hoping to do is actually bring some representatives from a couple of societies to come speak and really look at what they're planning virtually for the rest of this year. And and then certainly patient engagement, and then web meetings. Specifically out of last partner talks, when we were talking about web meetings and webinars, I've had a couple people really asking best practices and next steps once the event ends. What else can we do, or what else should we be doing? So great. So congresses, all right. This is very helpful. And like I said, feel free to put any other ideas in the chat if you do have them, but this is good just for me to level set on what would be of interest. Great, thank you all. I'll put the results up so you can see we have, looks like Congress trends is definitely of interest. So we're gonna work on putting that together because I think that would be really worthwhile. I know we've been trying to figure out, what are great ways that we could potentially partner with societies, certainly getting access to some of those member lists, and getting access to trying to introduce, a lot of our clients to new advisors, going back to the original case studies we looked at in today's discussion. I think this really opens up opportunities to expand the reach of different advisors that clients are looking at. And even, I've had discussions with some of the societies that we're talking to, opportunities even reaching residents and kind of the young impressionable, and really creating some different avenues there, since we can't be live and having the traditional events that you would have at each of these. So that's great. So we'll definitely try to put that together either for next month or the month after that for partner talks. So that's terrific. Great. Well, Jen, Ben, either of you have any parting words for our group that's joined us here today?
Mine would just be that I think there's a lot clients don't know about what they can do or what's possible. So I'd say don't assume they know they know how our software is used or can be used. Just I would assume that they probably don't understand the full landscape of what's possible.
And kind of piggybacking a little bit off what Ben just said, I think that the possibilities are endless. And when you're speaking with your clients, really dive in there and brainstorm, because your ideas are probably what they're thinking as well. So, again, the possibilities are limitless. And I think working together, like with that partnership, can really see them expand and grow.
Terrific. That's great. Well, I thank you both for your time and giving us your insights. That was really terrific. We would love to share out this content to our teams, as well as externally for people who weren't able to make it. So you'll be hearing from me. I'll just be asking you to sign a simple release form if you don't mind, so we can put this out on the web. Again, thank you for joining us. Look for emails for next month. Partner Talks will be the last Friday of every month. And we'll give you back some time during your day. So thank you.